The Sherman tank sat disabled in a Belgian village intersection, smoke rising from its engine compartment. Sergeant John Coleman pressed his face against the frozen periscope, watching shadows move through the morning fog. His breath came in white clouds inside the freezing steel coffin they called home. 4 other men sat cramped inside: gunner, loader, driver, radio operator, all of them knowing they were trapped. The radio crackled with screams from other American units being overrun. Coleman's hand shook as he gripped the tank commander's controls. Not from fear, from the cold. 23 years old, farm boy from Kansas, never thought he'd die in a Belgian forest. The Germans had launched Operation Wacht am Rhein, their last massive offensive. Hundreds of thousands of German troops, thousands of tanks, all pushing through the Ardennes to reach Antwerp and split the Allied armies in 2. The first German tank appeared through the fog like a ghost, a panther, then another, then 5 more. Coleman counted 12 Panzer IV tanks, 6 Panthers, and, his blood ran cold, 3 Tiger tanks. The Tigers were monsters, 60-ton nightmares with 82mm guns that could punch through a Sherman's armor from a mile away. The Germans called Shermans Ronsons, after the cigarette lighter, because they caught fire so easily. Coleman made a decision. His tank couldn't move, the left track was destroyed, but the turret could still rotate. And they had 17 armor-piercing rounds left. The crew looked at him like he was insane when he gave the order. Load armor-piercing, traverse left. We're going to engage. His loader, Private Martinez, actually laughed, a desperate, terrified laugh. Sarge, we're 1 broken Sherman against 21 Panzers. Coleman's response was ice cold. Then we better make every shot count. Fire on my command. The German tanks rolled closer, confident, unhurried. They probably thought the disabled Sherman was already abandoned. Standard procedure. American crews fled their tanks at the first sign of heavy German armor. But Coleman's crew stayed. The gunner, Corporal Davis, lined up the crosshairs on the lead Panther tank. Distance, 800 yards. Fire! The Sherman rocked backward. The armor-piercing round screamed across the frozen air at 2,800 feet per second. Direct hit. The Panther's front armor exploded inward, killing the crew instantly. The German tank erupted in flames, black smoke pouring into the white sky. The other German tanks stopped, confused. How was a disabled Sherman firing? Coleman didn't give them time to think. Next target! Panzer IV! Right side! Fire! The round hit another Tiger tank's front drive wheel, immobilizing it. The Tiger sat there, disabled just like the Sherman, but its crew abandoned it immediately, bailing out into the snow. Coleman watched through blurred vision as German tank crews started evacuating their vehicles. They weren't even hit. They were fleeing. An entire Panzer Division in full retreat from 1 American tank. 1 broken, barely functional, dying Sherman tank. Coleman tried to order another shot, but couldn't speak. Blood from his bitten tongue, from his ears, from his nose. Martinez had passed out from concussion. The driver was slumped over his controls. Davis kept his hand on the firing mechanism, ready, but there were no more targets. The Germans were gone, retreated, 8 German tanks burning, 7 more abandoned, 15 total, destroyed or captured by 1 disabled Sherman tank. American infantry arrived 3 hours later, expecting to find bodies. Instead, they found 5 barely conscious men sitting in a wrecked Sherman, surrounded by destroyed German armor. The infantry lieutenant couldn't believe what he was seeing. What the hell happened here? Coleman, being carried out on a stretcher, managed 2 words. We fought. The story spread through the American lines like wildfire. Germans couldn't believe it. American commanders couldn't believe it. The German Panzer Division commander was relieved of duty for retreating from a heavily fortified American defensive position. He tried to explain it was 1 tank. His superiors didn't believe him, called him a coward. The battle report was classified because it was too embarrassing. Germany's finest panzer troops defeated by 1 broken American tank. It destroyed German morale in the sector. Tank crews started seeing phantom Shermans everywhere. Coleman and his crew received the Distinguished Service Cross, but that wasn't the real impact. The battle proved something crucial. American crews could defeat superior German armor through courage, training, and pure determination. The myth of Panzer invincibility died in that Belgian village. Word spread to every American tank crew. You don't have to have the best tank to win. You just have to be the best crew. The Sherman tank was later recovered and sent to the United States as a war relic. But here's the terrifying detail they discovered during inspection. The tank's main gun had been damaged in the initial attack. The breech mechanism was cracked. Every single shot Coleman's crew fired had a 30% chance of exploding inside the turret, killing them all instantly. They'd fired 17 rounds. Any one of them could have detonated inside the tank. When Coleman was told about the damaged gun, he sat silently for a long moment. Then, he said something that became legend. "Good thing we didn't know. We'd have been too scared to fight." That's the real story. Not just about 5 men in a broken tank. About the moment when ordinary American soldiers realized they could stand against anything. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was firing one more shot when every instinct screamed to run. The Battle of the Bulge continued for weeks, but that one engagement changed everything. German intelligence reported fanatical American resistance in the sector. Tank crews who'd heard the story started standing their ground instead of retreating. The myth that Shermans had to run from German armor was shattered. 5 men in one broken tank had proven that victory wasn't about steel and firepower alone. Coleman returned home to Kansas after the war, became a school teacher, rarely spoke about what happened. His students had no idea the quiet man teaching them algebra had once held off an entire Panzer Division. He kept only one memento, a spent shell casing from that day, the 7th round fired, the one that destroyed the first Tiger tank. He kept it on his desk. When students asked what it was, he'd simply say, "A reminder that being broken doesn't mean being beaten." The other crew members lived full lives too. Martinez became a priest. Davis opened a mechanic shop. The driver became a farmer. The radio operator became a police officer. They reunited every year on December 16th, the date of the battle. They'd drink 1 beer each, tell the same stories, and sit in silence for exactly 17 minutes. 1 minute for each round they fired. They never called themselves heroes, just survivors who did what had to be done. The historical impact cannot be overstated. That single engagement was studied at West Point for decades. Military tacticians tried to understand how 15 German tanks were defeated by one immobile Sherman. The answer wasn't in tactics or technology. It was in the crew's refusal to accept the obvious outcome. They should have died. Statistics said they would die. Logic said they would die. But they decided statistics and logic didn't apply to them that day. German veterans of that battle, interviewed decades later, still couldn't explain the retreat. One Panzer commander said, "We knew we had them. We knew they were disabled. But every time we advanced, another of our tanks exploded. It was like fighting a ghost, a demon. We started believing the American tank couldn't be killed. When men believe they're fighting something supernatural, logic abandons them." Fear is contagious. So is courage. The Sherman tank that fought that battle, designated "in the mood" by its crew, sits today in the National World War II Museum. Visitors walk past it daily, not knowing its story unless they read the small placard. The placard lists the facts. 1 M4 Sherman, 5 crew members, 15 German tanks destroyed or captured December 16, 1944. But it doesn't mention the terror, the impossible odds, the 17 chances to die from their own gun exploding, the 17 times courage defeated fear. Coleman died in 1982 at age 61. Heart attack. Quick. Painless. At his funeral, the other 4 crew members served as pallbearers. They buried him with full military honors. A 7-gun salute. The shell casing from the 7th round was buried with him, his final wish. The priest, Martinez, his old loader, said something during the eulogy that made grown men cry. "John taught us that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is fire one more shot. Here's what makes this story truly terrifying. It almost didn't happen." Coleman later admitted he'd been reaching for the white surrender flag when the first German tank appeared. His hand was literally on the flag. But something made him pause. Maybe stubbornness, maybe anger, maybe pure Kansas farm boy refusal to quit. That 1 second hesitation changed history. 1 second between surrender and legend. 1 second between defeat and the most improbable tank battle victory in World War II. The final detail that still gives military historians chills. American intelligence later discovered that the German Panzer Division Coleman's crew defeated was supposed to spearhead the attack toward Antwerp. Their retreat delayed the German offensive by 2 crucial days in that sector. Those 2 days allowed American reinforcements to arrive and establish defensive positions, which means 5 men in a broken tank didn't just survive, they altered the timeline of the entire Battle of the Bulge, changed the war, changed history, all because they refused to quit. So, when someone tells you it's impossible, remember 5 American kids in a broken tank. Remember 17 shots that should have killed them from the inside. Remember 15 German tanks retreating in terror. Remember that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't steel or explosives. It's the refusal to accept defeat. Coleman's last interview before he died, he was asked, "How did you do it?" His answer, "We didn't think about the whole battle, just the next shot, then the next, then the next, 17 times. 1 shot at a time. That's how you defeat the impossible."